Everyone thought she was just a fragile old woman, slow steps, tired eyes, shaking hands. Even her own son believed she was too weak to fight back. What he didn't remember, what he never truly understood, was that before she became his mother, she was something else entirely, and tonight, he was about to learn the truth the hard way. The first thing people noticed about Eleanor Hale was how quiet she had become. She used to fill rooms with her voice once firm, steady, impossible to ignore. Now she moved like a shadow through her small, dimly lit house at the end of Cedar Lane. Her back was slightly bent, her hair thin and white, her hands marked with age spots and faint tremors that came and went without warning. Neighbors waved politely. Delivery drivers spoke loudly, slowly, as if she couldn't hear. Everyone assumed the same thing. She was harmless. Even her son, Marcus, had started to look at her that way. Marcus hadn't always been cruel. Once, when he was small, he used to cling to her leg, afraid of the dark, begging her to sit beside his bed until he fell asleep. He used to believe she was the strongest person in the world. But life had worn him down in ways Eleanor had tried and failed to stop. It began with small things, a sharp tone, a sigh when she asked a question, then insults disguised as jokes. "You're getting senile. Mom, you wouldn't understand. Just sit down. I'll handle it." Eleanor noticed everything she always had. That night, rain tapped against the windows like restless fingers as Marcus stood in the doorway of her living room. Arms crossed, jaw tight. He was in his 40s now. Tall and broad, his presence filling the space the way storms filled the sky, unpredictable and heavy. "You forgot again," he said. Eleanor looked up from her chair slowly. "Forgot what, Marcus?" "My money," he snapped. "I told you I needed it today." She frowned softly, as if searching her memory. "You said Friday." "I said today," he said, stepping closer. "Don't play games with me." Eleanor's fingers tightened around the armrest. "Just slightly." "I'm not playing games," Marcus laughed. But there was no humor in it. "You always do this. You pretend. You stole. You think I won't notice." The truth was simpler and sadder. Eleanor had noticed. She noticed how his pupils were too wide, how his movements were jittery, how his anger rose to fast and burned to hot. She noticed the smell on his breath that wasn't alcohol, the twitch in his jaw that reminded her of men she had interrogated decades ago. Men who lied to themselves before they lied to others. "I don't have it," she said gently. "Not today." That was when his face changed. It wasn't sudden. It was a slow, creeping transformation, like a shadow crawling across his features. The man she had raised disappeared, replaced by something harder, colder. "You're lying," he said quietly. "No," she replied. "I'm not." His hand slammed into the wool beside her head. The sound echoed through the room, sharp and violent. Eleanor didn't flinch. Her heart rate didn't spike. She simply breathed, steady and controlled, the way she had been trained to do long before Marcus was born. "You think I won't touch you because you're old," he hissed. "Because you're my mother." Eleanor looked into his eyes, then really looked. She saw desperation layered beneath rage, fear beneath arrogance. She also saw something else. "UNDERESTIMATIO and double quotes Marcus," she said softly. "Step back," he scoffed. "Or what?" For a moment, the room seemed to hold its breath. The ticking clock on the wall sounded unnaturally loud. Rain continued its steady rhythm outside, indifferent to the tension quell inside the house. Eleanor rose from her chair. Slowly, deliberately. Marcus smirked as she stood, her movements careful, almost fragile. "See, you can barely stand." She straightened her back inch by inch. The tremor in her hands vanished. Her eyes, once clouded with what looked like confusion, sharpened with startling clarity. "You always had this problem," she said calmly. "You mistake silence for weakness." Marcus blinked. Just once. Something about her tone unsettled him. "What are you talking about?" he asked. Eleanor walked past him toward the kitchen. Her steps were measured, balanced, precise. She reached the counter and placed her palms flat against it, grunting herself. "You were 12, she continued. When you asked me why I never talked about my job, Marcus frowned. That was a long time ago. I told you it was because some stories don't sleep, she said. They wait. She turned to face him. For 32 years, Eleanor said, I worked homicide. Marcus laughed, loudly this time. Oh, come on. You expect me to believe that. She didn't raise her voice. She didn't defend herself. She simply said, sit down. The command was instinctive, reflexive. Marcus's body reacted before his mind did. He hesitated, then shifted his weight. Confused by his own uncertainty, Eleanor noticed. Of course she did. You learn how to scare people, she went on, by being loud, by being big, by taking up space. That works on people who don't know fear. She took a step closer. Her presence changed the air between them. I spent my life sitting across from men who had buried bodies and slept just fine afterward, she said. Men who believed exactly what you believe now, that no one could stop them. Marcus swallowed. You're bluffing. Eleanor smiled sadly. I don't bluff. She moved to a small drawer near the sink and opened it. Inside was a neatly folded envelope, yellowed with age. She placed it on the table between them. Open it, she said. Marcus hesitated, then tore it open. Inside were photocopies, old credentials, faded photographs, commendations. A younger Eleanor stared back at him from one image, eyes fierce, posture confident, a badge clipped to her belt. His laughter died in his throat. This is fake, he muttered. Eleanor leaned forward, her voice dropping just enough to demand attention. Case file for 1472. Cold Creek murders. 3 victims, no witnesses. Everyone said it was impossible. Her eyes locked onto his. They were wrong. Marcus's breath grew shallow. You always wondered, she said, how I knew when you were lying as a child. Why I never raised my voice. Why I could stop you with a look. She straightened. This is why. The rain outside intensified, thunder rumbling low in the distance. Marcus took a step back, his confidence cracking. You're sick, he said. You're imagining things, Eleanor sighed. Denial is usually the last defense. She walked past him again, this time toward the front door. She opened it just enough for cold air to rush in. Leave, she said calmly. What if I don't? He challenged. Though his voice lacked its earlier force, Eleanor met his gaze one final time. Then I do what I've always done when someone refuses to walk away. She paused. I make sure they can't hurt anyone else. For the first time that night, Marcus felt fear, not the loud, dramatic kind, but the quiet, suffocating kind that settles deep in the bones. He left without another word. Eleanor closed the door gently behind him, locked it, and leaned against it for just a moment. Her hands shook now, but not from weakness, from the weight of memories she had spent a lifetime carrying. Outside, the storm raged on. Inside, Eleanor Hale stood alone, eyes steady, fully awake. Eleanor didn't sleep that night. She sat at the small kitchen table long after the rain softened into a distant whisper, the house wrapped in shadows and memory. The ticking clock had slowed in her ears, each second stretching longer than the last. She cradled a mug of tea that had long since gunkled, her fingers resting against the porcelain as if it could anchor her to the present. Marcus's face kept replaying in her mind, not the anger, not the threats, but the moment his certainty cracked, the moment he realized he had been wrong about her. That moment scared her more than his rage ever had, because men like Marcus didn't retreat forever. They retreated to plan. At dawn, Eleanor rose and moved through the house with quiet purpose. She showered, dressed carefully, and tied her thinning hair back the way she used to when she needed it out of her face. She chose practical clothes, nothing that screamed strength, nothing that invited attention. Habit was a hard thing to break. She opened the whole closet and reached past coats and old scarves to the box hidden behind them. The cardboard was soft, with age, the tape brittle. Inside lay fragments of a life she had buried, a notebook filled with cramped handwriting, a compact recorder, a folded photograph of a team long disbanded, faces young, eyes sharp, some now dead. She ran her thumb over the photograph, stopping on one face she hadn't thought about in years. Daniel Price. He had been her partner once, more than that, if she were honest. They had survived nights soaked in blood and paperwork that smelled of coffee and exhaustion. He had understood the silences. He had known when to push and when to wait. And he was the only person still alive who knew everything. Eleanor hesitated, then picked up the phone. Daniel answered on the fourth ring. You don't call unless something's wrong, he said, voice rough with sleep. It is, Eleanor replied. There was a pause. How wrong? Personal, she said. Dangerous. Another pause, longer this time. I'm listening. She told him only what she had to. Not the full history, not the guilt she carried, but enough about Marcus, about the confrontation, about the look in his eyes. Daniel exhaled slowly. You want me to come over? No, she said immediately. Not yet. Then what? I need information. Eleanor said quietly. Daniel didn't ask why. He never had. I'll see what I can find. But Eleanor, you can't do this alone. I've been alone a long time, she said softly. When she hung up, the house felt emptier somehow, as if the walls themselves knew what she had set in motion. By noon, Eleanor was at the grocery store, moving through aisles like any other elderly woman. She smiled at the cashier, thanked the bag boy, and ignored the faint tremor in her hands. No one noticed the way her eyes tracked reflections in glass or how she memorized exits without thinking. Across town, Marcus sat in his car outside a rundown apartment building, knuckles wet around the steering wheel. He hadn't slept either. Her words gnawed at him, digging beneath his skin. The badge, the photographs, the way she had looked at him, not afraid, not angry, but disappointed. Worse than anything else, she had known him, really known him. He told himself she was bluffing, that old people lied all the time, that fear made them dramatic. But the doubt wouldn't go away. Inside the apartment, a man named Lucas paced the living room, phone pressed to his ear. I told you she wouldn't be a problem, he snapped. Marcus slammed the car door and marched inside. She's not just some old woman. Lucas raised an eyebrow. What does that mean? It means she's hiding something, Marcus said. And if she talks, she won't. Lucas cut in. You're paranoid. Marcus's jaw tightened. You didn't see her. Lucas laughed. You're scared of your mom now? The word scared landed harder than any insult. You don't understand, Marcus said. She knew things about me, about people. Lucas shrugged. Even if she did, who's going to believe her? Marcus wasn't so sure anymore. That afternoon, Eleanor walked to the police station. It wasn't the one she used to work at. That building had been renovated, repainted, stripped of the soul she remembered. The station smelled the same, though cleaning solution and old paper. She stood at the front desk, posture slightly stooped, voice soft. I'd like to speak to someone about a concern, she said. The officer glanced at her, distracted. Is this an emergency? No, Eleanor replied. Not yet. She waited. They led her to a small interview room where a young detective named Reyes sat across from her, pen poised. He looked tired. He looked human. What's going on, ma'am? He asked kindly. Eleanor folded her hands in her lap. I believe my son may be involved in criminal activity. Reyes blinked. That's a serious claim. I know, she said. I wouldn't make it lightly. She didn't give him everything. She gave him patterns, names without accusations, timelines that didn't quite add up, enough to plant a seed. Reyes listened more intently as she spoke, his pen slowing. How do you know all this? Eleanor met his eyes. Because I used to do your job. He stared at her. You're joking. She slid a copy of her old credentials across the table. Reyes picked it up, eyes widening. This is real, yes, she said. And I'm asking you to be careful. Reyes nodded slowly. I will. As Eleanor left the station, she felt the familiar weight settle into her chest. The old fear, the old resolve. She had hoped never to return to this world. But the world had found her anyway. That evening, Marcus returned to her house. He didn't knock. The door splintered under his shoulder, wood cracking like a gunshot. Eleanor stood in the hallway, already awake, already waiting. You went to the police, he accused. I spoke to someone, she corrected. You're trying to ruin me. Eleanor's voice was calm. I'm trying to stop you. He lunged forward, anger overriding caution. What happened next was fast and quiet. Eleanor stepped aside, using his momentum against him, her grip precise, controlled. She twisted his wrist just enough to make the point without breaking it. Marcus cried out, more in shock than pain. Stumbling back, how? He guessed. I told you, she said. You forgot who I was. She didn't hit him. She didn't need to. She held him there, immobilized, her breath steady against his ear. Leave, she whispered, and don't come back. Marcus fled, terror burning behind his eyes. Eleanor locked the door and leaned against it, heart pounding now, not from fear, but from the knowledge that there was no turning back. Some battles ended quietly. Others had only just begun. By the third day, Eleanor could feel it in her bones. The calm after Marcus fled wasn't peace, it was the pause predators took before striking again. She had lived through enough investigations to recognize the pattern. People didn't disappear from bad decisions. Consequences arrived whether invited or not. She woke before sunrise, the sky still gray, and stood at the kitchen window watching her breath fog the glass. Somewhere out there, Marcus was spiraling. Men like him didn't sit with shame. They ran from it, buried it under anger, convinced themselves they were the victim. And victims, in their minds, were allowed to retaliate. Eleanor made oatmeal and ate slowly, forcing herself to maintain routine. Panic was a luxury she had never allowed herself, not then, not now. After breakfast, she sat at the table and opened her old notebook. The pages were brittle, the ink faded, but the handwriting was unmistakably hers. Names, dates, observations. She added a new entry. Marcus Hale, escalation phase, across town. Daniel Price Park outside a cafe, engine idling. He hadn't slept much either. The moment Eleanor called him, something inside him had snapped awake the part of him he thought retirement had dulled. He entered the cafe, ordered black coffee, and slid into a corner booth. His laptop glowed softly as he typed names Eleanor had given him. He still had contacts, fewer than before, but enough. What he found unsettled him. Marcus wasn't just desperate. He was connected. Small-time thefts, suspicious cash movements, a missing person report tied to someone Marcus had been seen with days before the disappearance. Nothing definitive, but enough threads to suggest something darker than addiction or anger. Daniel closed the laptop and rubbed his face. Damn it, Eleanor, he muttered. The afternoon, Eleanor received the call she had been dreading. Mrs. Hale, a woman said on the line. This is Detective Reyes. Eleanor closed her eyes briefly. Yes. We had an incident, Reyes continued. Your son was picked up for questioning. Eleanor's grip tightened on the phone. Is anyone hurt? Not physically, Reyes said. But he was unstable. I warned you, Eleanor said quietly. Yes, Reyes replied. You did? They released Marcus within hours. Lack of evidence. Lack of cooperation. Lack of courage from witnesses who didn't want trouble. Marcus didn't go home. He went looking. Night fell heavy and thick. Eleanor sat in the darkened living room, only a lamp lit beside her chair. She wasn't hiding. She wasn't preparing weapons. She was waiting. The knock came at 11:47 p.m. slow, deliberate. Eleanor rose and opened the door. Marcus stood there, eyes wild, clothes rumpled, rain dripping from his hair. He looked smaller somehow, not physically, but internally, like a man hollowed out by his own choices. You set me up, he said. No, Eleanor replied. You set yourself up. They think I'm dangerous now, he spat. You are, she said gently. He stepped inside without invitation. You ruined my life. Eleanor closed the door behind him. I gave you every chance not to ruin it yourself. His hands shook. You always thought you were better than me. No, she said. I thought you could be better than this. That broke something in him. He grabbed a lamp and hurled it against the wall. Glass shattered, scattering like frozen rain. He turned back to her, chest heaving. "I'm not afraid of you," he said. Eleanor nodded. "That's the problem." She moved, then not toward him, but toward the hallway. Marcus followed, confused, anger driving him forward. "You think I won't?" She stopped and turned so suddenly he nearly collided with her. Her voice dropped, firm and controlled. "Enough." The word landed with authority born of decades. Marcus froze. "Sit," she said. He resisted for half a second, then collapsed onto the chair behind him, breathing hard. Eleanor crouched to his level. "Listen to me," she said. "Really listen. I don't want your lectures. You need them," she replied, "because this is the moment where you choose what kind of man you'll be remembered as." He laughed bitterly. "Like I have a choice. You always have a choice," she said. "You just don't always like the cost." She stood and retrieved her notebook, flipping to an old page. "I once interrogated a man who killed his own brother," she said. "He told me the same thing you're telling me now, that the world forced his hand." Marcus stared at her. "He died in prison," she continued, alone, convinced until the end that he was the victim. Silence filled the room. "I won't protect you anymore," Eleanor said. "Not from the law, not from yourself." His voice cracked. "You're my mother." "Yes," she said softly. "And that's why I'm stopping you." A siren wailed faintly in the distance. Marcus looked around, panic flashing across his face. "What did you do?" "I told the truth," Eleanor said. There was another knock at the door from this time. "Official." Marcus sagged back in a chair. "You always were ruthless." Eleanor's eyes filled, but her voice did not waver. "I was fair." She opened the door to Detective Reyes and to uniformed officers. "Marcus Hale," Reyes said. "You're under arrest." As they led him away, Marcus turned back one last time. "I thought you were weak," he said. Eleanor met his gaze. "I thought you were stronger." The door closed. Eleanor stood alone in the quiet house, the broken lamp still glittering on the floor. She sank into her chair, exhaustion finally catching up to her. The fight wasn't over, not inside her heart, but for the first time in years, she had chosen truth over fear, and that choice would echo longer than any violence ever could. The days that followed were deceptively quiet. Eleanor's house returned to its usual rhythm, the soft ticking of the clock, the occasional creak of the old floorboards, the rain washing the streets outside. But she knew that calm was fragile, like a pane of glass that could shatter at any touch. She spent mornings walking through her garden, hands lightly brushing the petals, listening to the wind carry secrets of the world she had once been a part of. There was an odd peace in the act of tending life, of nurturing something small and living. When everything around her had once been so steep in death and danger, it reminded her that the strength she carried wasn't just about survival, it was about presence, about being rooted even when storms raged. But the storm had not yet passed. Marcus Hale's rest had temporarily removed the immediate threat, but Eleanor knew it wasn't enough. He wasn't a criminal mastermind. Not yet. But he was cunning, and desperation can make a man unpredictable. She spent hours at the table, notebook open, mapping out timelines, analyzing his habits, even small tells she had noticed over years of motherly observation. It was instinct at first, but her instincts had been honed in fire and blood. Detective Reyes stopped by in the late afternoon, a folder in hand. "Eleanor," he said, voice low, "I've been going over your information, and I need you to know Marcus isn't acting alone. There are people in his circle, people who've been facilitating some of his activities behind the scenes." Eleanor leaned back, eyes narrowing. She had expected this. "How many?" she asked. "3 that we know for certain," Reyes replied. "But they're careful, they cover their tracks." "We don't have enough evidence yet," she sighed. Her body ached, not from each, but from the weight of responsibility she refused to place in anyone else's hands. "Then we keep watching," she said. "Every move, every contact, every transaction." Reyes nodded. "Are you sure you want to be involved this deeply?" Eleanor's eyes softened, but her voice was firm. I don't want to be, but I can't. Just sit back and wait for him to hurt someone else or himself. That night, she prepared the house differently. Locks checked, windows inspected. The knives in the kitchen drawers, ordinary kitchen knives arranged with precision where she could reach them quickly, but she wasn't preparing to fight physically. That wasn't the strength she wielded anymore. She was preparing for confrontation of a different kind. Psychological, strategic, meticulous. Her phone buzzed quietly. It was Daniel Price. I found something, he said immediately. Urgency in his tone. Marcus's friends, they have plans that extend beyond petty crime. Something bigger. They're planning an exchange tonight. You need to know. Eleanor's stomach tightened. Where? She asked. Abandoned warehouse on Mill Street. Midnight, Daniel replied. You need to stay safe. Eleanor, let the authorities handle it. She closed her eyes and took a deep breath. You don't understand. I am the authority, she said. The words sounded strange even to her own ears, but they were true. The warehouse was cold and dark when she arrived. Shadows pulled in corners, and the smell of oil and rust hung in the air. She moved quietly, blending with the darkness, every step calculated, every breath measured. She wasn't there to attack. She was there to observe, to understand, to anticipate. Inside, Marcus and two men she didn't know were huddled over crates filled with cash. They were discussing plans loudly, enough for Eleanor to catch, but not for anyone outside to hear. Their excitement was palpable, a heady mix of greed and adrenaline. You've got it all wrong, Marcus said, slamming his hand down on the crate. We can't wait. We need to move fast. The taller of the other men leaned in. Relax. We've done this before. You just need to trust us. Eleanor's pulse quickened not from fear, but from the precision of her thoughts. Every angle, every escape route, every weakness. Years of experience allowed her to see the cracks in their confidence. She stepped back, carefully, silently, until she found a vantage point near a set of stairs that gave her a full view of the group. She spoke softly into her recorder, documenting everything. Her calm voice contrasted sharply with the chaos before her. Marcus Hale, reckless, impatient, to accomplices, overconfident, underprepared, likely escape routes, a side-loading dock, and roof access near the north wall. Timing, immediate action within 20 minutes. Minutes passed. Eleanor stayed hidden, letting them talk themselves into a false sense of security. She knew from decades of experience that people in the midst of greed and fear often betrayed themselves in ways they didn't even realize. Then Marcus laughed aloud. Bitter laugh. We're unstoppable, he said. No one can touch us. Eleanor shook her head slightly. No one, she whispered. But it wasn't the kind of no one Marcus thought she meant. She didn't step out of the shadows. She didn't confront them physically. Instead, she reached for her phone and sent a secure message to Detective Reyes and his team, detailing exactly what she had observed. Every move, every word, every detail of the warehouse's layout. The sound of sirens in the distance was faint at first, then grew louder. Panic swept over Marcus's face, and for the first time, he realized that he wasn't untouchable. He ran toward a side door. Eleanor followed, unseen, moving faster than he expected for someone her age. She could see every hesitation, every misstep. When he stumbled, caught between flight and fear, she didn't touch him. She let the law, her law, informed by her years of experience, do its work. By the time the authorities stormed the warehouse, Marcus and his accomplices were trapped. Eleanor stepped out from her hiding place, rain dripping from her coat, her eyes steady. She didn't feel triumph. She felt something heavier, relief, responsibility, exhaustion. Detective Reyes approached her, admiration and concern in equal measure. You did this, he said quietly. Eleanor shook her head. I didn't. I just remembered who I used to be. And as Marcus and his accomplices were led away in handcuffs, Eleanor realized something profound. She had raised a son, a man who had thought she was weak, and she had reminded him too late. Perhaps that strength wasn't just in muscle or age. Strength was knowledge, patience, control, and sometimes strength was simply knowing when to let the world catch up to its own consequences. She walked back to her house, the rain soaking her coat, the cold pressing against her skin. Inside, everything was quiet again. But Eleanor knew that the storm, though momentarily quelled, would leave its mark forever. She poured herself a cup of tea, staring out the window at the city lights glinting on wet streets. She had survived. She had fought. But she also knew that survival was never about ending a fight. It was about being ready for the next one, no matter how quiet it seemed. No matter how fragile the world appeared, Eleanor sat down, letting the mug warm her hands, and allowed herself a brief moment of peace. Tomorrow would bring new challenges. Tomorrow, she would be ready again. Because this mother was no ordinary woman. And anyone who thought otherwise would learn the hard way. Morning came slowly, stretching pale light across Eleanor's living room. The storm had passed, leaving streets glistening with rain, leaves heavy with water. For the first time in days, she allowed herself a deep and hurried breath. She had survived the confrontation, seen Marcus face consequences, and ensured no one else would fall victim to his reckless impulses. Yet, a mother's heart is never truly still, never free from worry for a child, even one who had strayed. She moved quietly through the house, checking windows, doors. Every corner she had meticulously secured. The broken lamp from Marcus's last visit lay in shards on the floor. She knelt and carefully gathered the pieces, letting the task ground her. Each shard, each remnant of chaos, was a reminder of what had been and what she had endured. Her phone buzzed softly. Daniel Price's name lit the screen. She answered immediately, voice steady. "They're in custody," she said. "All three of them. I saw the reports," Daniel replied, a note of disbelief in his tone. "Marcus, he actually went down without causing further damage. You really handled it." Eleanor shrugged. "I didn't handle him. I reminded him of the consequences. Sometimes that's enough." There was silence. Then Daniel's voice softened. "You've always been remarkable, Eleanor. I just hope you know that." "I don't need reminding," she replied quietly. "But thank you." After the call, she wandered into her garden. Sunlight broke through the clouds, illuminating the wet petals. Birds chirped. Unaware of the human turmoil that had passed under their watch, Eleanor touched the leaves, feeling their wet resilience, their quiet endurance. There was a lesson in that for her. A lesson she had known, but had been too enmeshed in fear to fully embrace. Life continued. Strength wasn't about fighting endlessly. It was about surviving, teaching, and being ready when the world demanded it. Later, she walked through her neighborhood. Neighbors waved, some cautiously, some warmly. None could see the woman beneath the surface, a former homicide detective, mother, survivor of threats both domestic and external. They only saw Eleanor Hale, gentle, elderly, almost fragile. They would never know the nights she had spent strategizing, the adrenaline coursing through her veins as she anticipated her son's next move. The quiet determination that had ensured his rest without physical harm. Inside her home felt lighter. Eleanor sat down at the table, notebook open, pen in hand. She began documenting every detail, every thought, every strategy, not just for herself, but for anyone who might face a similar storm. She understood now that her story, her experience, could be a map for others lost in fear or facing betrayal. Hours later, the front door creaked open. Eleanor looked up to see Detective Reyes standing there, notebook in hand, a cautious smile on his face. "You don't need to be alone through this," he said softly. "You've done enough." Eleanor nodded. "I know, but being ready, it's who I am." He hesitated. "You saved more than just yourself, Eleanor. You saved him too, your son. He may not realize it now, but this could change him." Her eyes softened, reflecting both sorrow and hope. "I hope so." She whispered, "I've failed in ways a mother shouldn't fail, but perhaps this will be his turning point." Reyes lingered, glancing at the notebook filled with meticulous notes. You truly never stopped being the detective, did you? Eleanor allowed a small smile. Some things never leave us. Some things are our essence. You can't fight that. You can only use it wisely. As he left, she closed the door gently, locking it behind him. She walked to the window, watching the sunset paint the sky with streaks of amber and rose. The city below continued, oblivious to the quiet victories and defeats that had unfolded in one small home. Eleanor Hale took a deep breath. The weight of the past, the storm she had endured, the son she had confronted, these things would not define her. She had faced what few mothers ever could, not with sheer strength or fear, but with intelligence, patience, and unwavering resolve. She poured herself a cup of tea, held it in her hands, and let the warmth seep through her. Outside, the world moved on, and inside, Eleanor finally allowed herself to feel the full measure of relief that she had survived, that justice had been served, and that the mother her son had underestimated was still very much alive, very much aware, and very much in control, because you cannot measure strength by age, by outward appearances, or even by proximity. Strength lies in wisdom, experience, and the courage to confront what others fear. Eleanor Hale had proven that quietly, fully, and indelibly, and Marcus would remember it forever.